Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow Freedom Fighters, and welcome to episode 235 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, I am sharing a recent meeting of the Freedom Fighters Mastermind Group. This is a group of criminal defense lawyers that meets on a monthly basis in somewhat of a book club format. But on today's episode, you'll hear from our most recent meeting, the transition of this group from more of a kind of traditional book discussion, book club, to a more intentional mastermind group. We have our meetings scheduled for the next 14 months, all the way through the end of 2025. Next month in November, we're going to be reading John Maxwell's 21 Laws of Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And we're using as our go-by Vern Harnesh's Scaling Up. I'm trying to show this, but because of my hidden background, this is kind of hard to see on the screen. But Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, Scaling Up is going to be kind of our go-by book for the book club. We'll kind of talk through that and work through some of the exercises of that book during the mastermind meetings every other month. And then on the other months, we will be discussing a business book that complements the most recent section of Scaling Up that we have completed. So absolutely huge fan of John Maxwell. Our next meeting is on November the 15th. We'll be discussing his Laws of Leadership, one of my favorite business books that I have ever read. And then back into the Scaling Up at our next meeting. You can find the meetings in the events section of our Freedom Fighters website or on the Freedom Fighters app. freedomfighters.law is the website. And if you just go to the events page, you'll be able to see the upcoming mastermind meetings. But on today's episode, again, I shared kind of the opening sequence about the first 20 minutes of our most recent meeting. I gave a presentation on that meeting about kind of how we were moving more from this kind of like a haphazard book club, business book club, into more of an intentional strategy. If you're interested in joining the mastermind group, there is no cost other than your time and expectation of openly sharing about both your wins and struggles in your criminal defense practice. So if you have any interest in joining the group, please reach out to me either by phone or email. Would love to have you a part of the group. Again, I cut out after the first 20 minutes. I allowed one question to remain with Rob Heroy's permission on the podcast for today, but outside of that, cut the conversation short because there is kind of very, I wouldn't say confidential, but private information that gets shared on these meetings by lawyers about their kind of business struggles, specific numbers. And so again, invite you to come in and be a part of the group, but cut it short after that first kind of back and forth with Rob, who's been an awesome part of the group. So hope you guys enjoy this episode. If you're interested in joining us, love to have you, and reach out to me if you have questions.
At least this portion of it, if we need to block off any discussion, we can do that. But basically, kind of like what where are we at with the book club, and kind of like what do we want to gain out of this going forward. So just a couple of quick hitting reminders. I'm going to probably stop kind of like pushing out content outside of the Freedom Fighters space. And the main reason for that is that I don't want to keep sending information to people's emails that really kind of aren't interested in being a part of the group. So, there's been some people that, were involved early on in the book club and then have kind of fallen off the map. And then there's been some people that, I've kind of been continually inviting because they came to one or both of the summits and, just kind of don't want to bother their email with book club related items if they're not interested. So we're just going to kind of operate schedule wise and update wise off of the group discussion, the owners group discussion, which is on both the website and on the app. We are also getting ready to launch an admin discussion group, which I would say would be for like the kind of top admin person within your office. And so we're going to start it with kind of a smaller group of people to see what kind of traction that can bring. So I'm going to like share an email and put something into the last summit's attendees, as well as put something into the group space on that front so that admin team members can bounce ideas off of each other in a similar fashion to what we've kind of been doing with the book club and discussion section online. And then just a couple of upcoming dates. I'm trying to get the mock trial date on the 7th approved for CLE hours. And what we're going to do at that mock trial date is basically a DWI trial, kind of basically like in real time. There'll be a couple of presentation sections, but then it will be basically kind of moving through kind of direct and cross of witnesses, arguments, how to deliver those, and then polishing those. So it's going to be kind of like a real-time walkthrough of a DWI case that is speeding related, because I also think that there's not a lot of challenges to speeding. So I think we're going to bring in, we're going to ask Doug Scott, who has got like a lot of materials about appropriate use of radar and kind of make that the theme. So I'm hoping to get, I think we're going to apply for 6 hours of CLE, and I'm hoping most of that will get approved by the bar. So that will be, in March. So kind of just like a quick reflection in terms of, where did we come from, as a club? Well, this like was at Ron's suggestion. Briefly after the summit, like I followed up last year with individual people at the summit and said, hey, what did you like about the summit? What could we do to improve? And Ron was like, we need like a more regular conversation. Like if we're going to continue this, like, my initial thought was, hey, let's continue this over messaging form, with chats back and forth and questions back and forth. And he was like, we need to have a, more of an ongoing conversation. So Ron really suggested the book club. And then obviously, we've had a lot of great discussions.
What is this picture you got of me?
This you actually got shown at the summit, Rob. This was nobody was picking their nose, as I said at the summit. This was like at least a clean shot of nobody doing that. There was
like
no,
I'm like nodding off, like
no middle fingers presented or anything along those lines. But yeah, I mean, it's been great conversations, and I feel like it's kind of allowed us to, again, have discussions about issues that we're having in our businesses, suggestions for improvement. But it's also been a great way to kind of like build community and relationships and kind of see who is kind of interested in this ongoing conversation. And so that's kind of like coming out of last year's summit, and we had our 2024 goal session, and then really started the book club in full swing in January. This has been like a great place for us to have conversations and share some great insights into the awesome works that we're reviewing. But I think in terms of like where we are going, it would be helpful for a number of reasons to kind of be a little bit more intentional with the readings. And then also, I don't want to call it like homework, but have a way of kind of sharing a little bit more about our firms on paper. I mean, there's somewhat limited time in terms of this like hour conversation. There it is, scaling up. This is just such a wonderful like way to kind of deep dive into some of these issues. And I know that there's other, you can do EOS, like they have a very similar like framework in terms of filling out worksheets and that type of thing. You can do, eMyth has a similar deal on their end. But scaling up to me is definitely like one of the best places to again do this kind of like deep dive. So whoops, I clicked the wrong button there. So kind of just brief, I shared this at last year's summit. This is just kind of our revenues year over year at Minnick Law from 2018 to 2023, and you can see like this basically moderate gain from 2018 to 2020, and then moderate gain from 2021 to 2023. But there's this giant jump between 2020 and 2021. And that's because like during that COVID year, Lance and Git and I basically had time to do a deep dive into scaling up, and spent a lot. Like, I mean, we literally just had like weeks on end without court, not having to run anywhere. So we were just regularly meeting every week, going through all of the worksheets of scaling up, discussing, hey, what are our core values, like uncovering that, how do we decide what the focal point should be? What's our big, hairy, audacious goal? How do we complete this one-page strategic plan? What key performance indicators do we want to focus on for individual positions? Like all of these things that scaling up walks you through, and created this like monumental jump from 2020 to 2021. But then I would say there's been a lot of stagnation since, because we haven't really kind of taken it, any further. Like we kind of just did our 1 year thing. We've somewhat like, we pretty regularly are doing the one-page strategic plan on a quarter by quarter basis, but there's not the intentionality that there was during that time, because frankly, the three of us got busy. But it's kind of like, that's the value of working on your business instead of in it. Like to me, like almost peak point is like, if you're not taking that step back, you just see these like marginal gains because your head is down and you're just kind of pushing forward through the next thing. So just from like a personal standpoint, it's to me like, hey, there are a lot of these Rockefeller habits and a lot of the takeaways from scaling up that we either A, never put into practice, B, let fall off the radar, or C, just didn't improve on. Like we just didn't keep maximizing, took our foot off the gas, and now kind of are seeing the results of that. So what the book promises, what Harnish promises, basically as the outcome of this in the first chapter, is that, hey, if you do these things and you do them well, you're going to see 2 times the cash flow, 3 times profitability, 10x valuation, and more time within a 3-year period. And so, that's obviously, some big promises, but at the same time, I would say just based on us putting it into practice in real time on our ends, we saw that like massive jump in terms of revenues, based almost exclusively on being more intentional with the business. So I think for us, like not only, are we individually kind of going to gain if we really sink our teeth into this, but also from like a larger perspective. Again, I think it's so amazing to like learn from you guys about like how your businesses are operating. And we get a very brief period of time to share that. And I think if we could share a little bit more, so what does our business look like? Where are we, encountering problems? Where are opportunities for growth? I think that we would take a lot more away from these meetings if we could kind of see each other's businesses on paper. Sometimes it's easy to pat yourself too much on the back or downplay, how successful your business is. But when you kind of see everything on paper, it kind of makes it a little bit easier to diagnose, how am I measuring up, so to speak, against other people that are pushing it. And we don't all have like identical business models, but I do think the more that we share this kind of information, the more it's kind of like, oh, here's a blind spot that I wasn't encountering. At the summit, Ron sat down with me and shared several like detailed financial worksheets that he had been working on based on I think it's How to Manage a Small Law Firm, is the company that Uli Swaster was from. And so Uli was one of the speakers on day 2 of the culture panel. But he's been doing this like boot camp program with Uli, and it was just awesome. Like him, seeing all of these, different financial breakdown of, for this particular type of charge, here is our profit. And that's based on, each admin person spending an average amount of time for this type of like intake call. How many court appearances are there? Like, I mean, it was incredibly specific about like what is the takeaway. And he basically said there was a couple of types of cases that we decided we're no longer taking because we're either not making any money on these cases, or we're actually literally losing money. One of the cases that I think we're probably in a similar boat on was the failure to reduce speed from a accident charge, because in Buncombe County, DAs are pretty specific about what type of paperwork you need from an insurance company in order to get that charge dismissed. And basically, these cases can get continued for 6, 8, 10 months, over a year, in order to get that particular paperwork. And when looking at it on paper, it's like the amount of admin time to update calendars and to follow up with the client and to request this paperwork. It's like if you're charging, $400 for that type of case, it doesn't make financial sense. Like there's no way to kind of recoup the money on that's being kind of put out there. So again, there were certain types of cases where he's like, it just doesn't make financial sense for us to keep moving forward on. So again, it was just, that was like the power of like seeing somebody else's business on paper. And I've asked him to share that information, and it's like, if I can kind of sink my teeth into that a little bit more, I'd love to do that. But I think that to me is kind of like the power of this space. And it's been awesome. Like, we reviewing the Profit First book, and some of the other, takeaways from individuals' business. Like we've made changes at our firm based on insights from the book club. But again, I think we can kind of take it to the next level. And I'll just kind of like finish the opening thing here with this line from page 5 of Scaling Up. So this is in the overview section. This is titled "The Dumbest in the Room." Senior leaders know they have succeeded in building an organization that can scale when they are the dumbest people in the room. Every business is more valuable to the degree that it does not depend on its top leader. And I think that, the goal for us collectively is to be the dumbest people in the room. But I think that we get to that point by learning from one another. Like that's the real value of this. So again, I would say that if there's ways that, I don't want this to become overly burdensome. And that's part of the reason that with the Scaling Up, like being the main place, like basically each chapter that we read from Scaling Up going forward, the next month there's like a business book that kind of supports the themes of that chapter, but is basically doesn't require kind of like the homework side of things. So it doesn't become like this overly burdensome thing to be a part of. And if there is kind of a similar document that you already have within your firm that you're using to track some of these numbers or to develop strategy, I'm cool with like just sharing what, whatever kind of might be a similar, framework to what we're doing in scaling up. But I think if we can kind of look at each other's firms on paper, even with like a broad overview, it'll be really powerful in terms of seeing, where are the blind spots and where are strengths, and man, this person is crushing it in this area. Hey, what do I need to be focused on? Core values, I'm lost on that. What are people putting down for this kind of thing as like important to have be the identity of their firm? What do finances look like? How much should I be spending on these areas? I think that's going to be just like really powerful for us to have kind of a open sharing conversation on that front. So I think that is it. Let me go ahead and stop the share. But yeah, we kind of just opening thoughts on that front. And there's not really like any specific worksheets from these first two chapters. So again, it's kind of like take away what you want to take away. It's definitely first chapter is pretty much like the 1,000-foot view of a lot of the documents that are used within the scaling up framework. But we'll kind of go through each one of those documents, and they're all free. Like they have them all online. I'll put a link to it in the group discussion board. But all of the scaling up documents are 100% available online. So yeah, kind of big picture overview.
Sure, I'll go first. Yeah, I'm more than happy to share my finances. I think it's probably a great idea to do these things in advance, to one, think about it more ahead of time and sort of commit our thoughts to this as opposed to just kind of winging it every week. So I like that idea, and I have no problems with it. It's we've talked about this before, Jake, probably less so Brian, but we're sort of in a very different model, and I'm not certain that I would want to scale up. I'm certainly intrigued by the idea of it, but for me, it's always sort of a back and forth of hey, things are going pretty well now with the model that I have, where it's sort of being a little more specialized in what I do. And, I'm in a firm where we sort of more or less share overhead and common expenses. And it's going well. My hours aren't terrible. I don't have to deal with a lot of the bullshit. But at the same time, there's certainly, opportunities that are being left behind. And so it's an interesting discussion going forward. I don't know that I would necessarily decide to scale up at some point, but even if not, there's lots of things that we kind of discussed that are helpful for me to think about and implement.
Yeah, just real quick to answer or to kind of respond to that before Brian, you jump in, because I was a little bit nervous about picking this book because I felt like solos and people that are like one lawyer firms, with an assistant aren't going to want to be a part of the book club because they're going to be like, I don't have any interest in growing from a personnel standpoint. And there are chapters within Scaling Up that kind of talk about who do you have on your team and how can you kind of grow from a number of people standpoint. But I think even if you were solo and never had any intention of hiring anybody, the principles of the book would allow you to scale your business if by doing that you mean make more money or spend less time doing the same work. And so I think, beyond just like getting bigger as a organization. I think that's what most people think of when they think of this book, or even like there's certain chapters that kind of concentrate on that. But I think it's just like, how do you maximize the time that you are spending within your business? And so I'm trying to make sure that I'm encouraging, people that are truly like solo to put in the time, energy, and work on that front. Because again, one thing that I said at the summit on day 2 is that you need to get really good, and I think I've shared this here maybe in the past, but you need to get really good at firing yourself. And that used to be an entrepreneur problem. How do I basically, recognizing that maybe I'm the dumbest person in the room on this area, like how do I find somebody else that can do this thing better than me? Marketing, answering phones, whatever it might be. Like, how can I eliminate me within the firm? But that used to be just the owner problem, and it wasn't for everybody else on the team. Now, because of AI, everybody is like responsible for firing themselves, because AI allows you to like fire yourself at an incredible rate, which is so awesome. And so I think, just thinking about, I feel like we're in a weird space where even within like a business framework, scaling used to mean, again, I get more people that are working at my company. I think a lot of businesses are now going to scale without hiring real people. Like they're gonna scale through AI. So I think that it's going to be really beneficial to everybody that dives in, regardless of like what growth means for you.
Well, and you're right. You certainly should not have that hesitation with me. I've very much enjoyed kind of discussing these books and the principles, even if I'm not necessarily going to scale up. What other format do we have where we really have these discussions? So I think they're great. So certainly don't think I'm feeling left behind at all, because I'm not.
So that was the beginning of our most recent Freedom Fighters Mastermind Group meeting. Again, I cut it short because of the private information that gets shared during these meetings among the owners that are on the Zoom call. Please reach out to me if you are interested in joining us. Again, this is for criminal defense law firm owners that are trying to improve their practices and improve their lives through this idea exchange. Would love to have you be a part of it, and look forward to speaking with you again next time.